The Whitmore family had it all: money, influence, and a mansion carved into the hills of Maine where nothing ever went wrong. Until one morning in 1987, when every single one of them disappeared. No forced entry, no broken locks. Their breakfast plates still warm. A wealthy father, a gentle mother, and 2 teenage daughters, gone without a trace. For 20 years, their estate sat untouched, locked behind legal disputes and overgrown hedges, until a crew arrived in 2007 to begin demolition. And inside a wall, behind the grandfather clock that hadn't ticked in decades, they heard knocking. Welcome to Uncommon Stories. If this story stays with you, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from and when the truth found you. Now let's begin. Camden, Maine, autumn 1987. The leaves hadn't turned yet. The ocean air was warm and sharp with salt, and the Whitmore mansion sat above it all, perched on a bluff like a lighthouse for money. Robert Whitmore was 48, CEO of one of the largest shipping companies on the East Coast. His wife, Eleanor, was known for her charity galas and press dresses, and their daughters, Caroline, 17, and Lacey, 14, were the kind of girls who wave at neighbors even when no one waved back. They lived in a house of 13 rooms, for fireplaces, and 2 grand staircases that curved like ribbon to the center hall. And on October 3rd, 1987, they vanished. The housekeeper, Greta, arrived just after 8 a.m. The front gate was open. The door was unlocked. Inside, the kettle was still warm. The beds were unmade. The radio in the kitchen played softly, classical music, barely audible. But no one answered. In the dining room, for plates, eggs untouched, glasses of orange juice with the pulp still rising. Greta checked every room. No one, not in the sunroom, not in the basement, not in the library. Even the dog, a golden retriever named Chester, was gone. She called the police. When they arrived, nothing seemed wrong. No signs of a break-in. No blood. No shattered glass. Just a perfect house missing its people. The case exploded. Headlines read, "Millionaire family vanishes overnight. No ransom. No leads. No answers." Did the Whitmores flee or were they taken? Detectives found no passports missing. No large withdrawals from bank accounts. All cars were still in the garage. Robert Whitmore had no known enemies. Eleanor had no secret lovers. The girls had no runaway plans. But the front door was unlocked, and the back door was bolted from the inside. For weeks, helicopters searched the coastline. Boats dragged the harbor. Divers scoured underwater caves. Nothing. Some said they ran. Others said they were killed by someone they trusted. But there were no calls. No ransom notes. No bodies. Just a missing family and a house that refused to give up its secrets. In 1989, the property was frozen under probate. No heirs. No activity. And over the years, the story faded. Locals whispered about it. Teenagers dared each other to sneak in. But no one ever lived there again. Until 2007. The town council finally auctioned the land to a developer. The house was scheduled for demolition, and that's when workers began tearing into the east wing. Behind the fireplace, walled shut, was an unexpected column of hollow space. The lead contractor leaned his head in and thought he heard something, a dull, rhythmic thumping. At first, they thought it was a raccoon, or echoes from their own equipment. But when they pulled back more of the plaster, they found it, a narrow passageway, lined with dust and wood rot. At the end, a locked steel door, scratched, bent, but still closed. They called the police. And when the door was finally forced open, what they saw didn't make sense. 4 people, thin, pale, eyes wild with light. Robert, Eleanor, Caroline, Lacey, alive. 20 years had passed. But somehow, the Whitmores had never left. They were taken to the hospital. And over the next week, the truth began to emerge. Or part of it. Because even though the family was alive, their story didn't hold together. They claimed they had been locked inside the room since 1987. No food deliveries, no contact, no light, but they weren't starved. They weren't dirty, and there were no signs of mental deterioration. Caroline, now 37, said they were protected. Lacey whispered that someone brought things. Robert refused to speak to anyone for days. And Eleanor? She kept asking the same question. Who opened the clock? Authorities were stunned. There were no blueprints showing that secret room, no records, no mechanical access. And yet when they opened it, the inside was furnished. Beds, canned goods, a small battery light, books, and a note, folded, faded, taped to the inside of the steel door. One line, "You're safe here. Don't come out until the clock stops ticking." The clock in question, an antique grandfather clock, had been broken for decades, or so everyone thought. But when investigators opened its base, they found something new, a speaker and a wire leading deep behind the wall to where the room had been. For 20 years, someone kept the Whitmores hidden and alive. But the question was, who? The hospital lights felt too bright, too modern, too loud. Eleanor flinched every time a door opened. Robert stared at the ceiling tiles for hours without blinking. The daughters, grown women now, still whispered like little girls, afraid the walls would hear them. It wasn't just that the Whitmores had vanished. It was that they had returned, unchanged. Dr. Melanie Shaw was assigned as their lead psychiatrist. She had treated trauma before, war veterans, abuse survivors, but nothing like this. 20 years in a secret room and not one broken bone, not one symptom of psychosis. Their teeth were clean. Their bodies were malnourished but functional. Their minds? Calm. Too calm. Dr. Shaw kept asking the same question. Why didn't you scream? Caroline smiled. We were told not to. The police combed the mansion again, this time with new eyes, behind walls, under floorboards. In vents no one thought to search in 1987. They found a narrow maintenance shaft behind the fireplace. Wires ran through it, old, dusty, and one wire led directly to the speaker in the grandfather clock. Another to a hidden panel near the back exit. The conclusion? Someone built the room intentionally. It wasn't a panic room. It was a prison. Inside, detectives found journals. Dozens of pages, all in Eleanor's handwriting. Some entries were ordinary. Lacey lost her doll again. Robert read to us from memory. Caroline has grown tall. Others were chilling. The man came today. He left soup, still no light, still no answers. And one, marked in red ink. I heard a second voice. According to the journals, someone visited them once a week. A man, faceless, never named. He spoke little, left supplies, sometimes batteries, books, even shampoo. They never saw his face. He always came when the light in the speaker clicked twice. When asked why they never tried to escape, Robert finally spoke. His voice was dry, distant, because we didn't know we were missing. We thought it was for our safety. That answer broke something in the room, because it wasn't just captivity. It was control. Theories exploded. Was it ransom gone wrong? Was it a family member? Some called it psychological conditioning. Others called it a cult. But no one had a clear answer. Until Caroline mentioned the man in gray. She said He wore gloves, spoke through the speaker, and once, when she was very small, he told her, "Outside is broken. Stay where it's safe." She believed him for years. So did her sister. But one night, the speaker didn't click. There was no food, no visit, no voice. They waited and waited until the silence became unbearable. So Caroline did something unthinkable. She knocked 3 times, and from the wall, somewhere far behind it, she heard someone knock back. The next day, the clock stopped ticking. That was the day they were found. The media swarmed. Headlines flooded back. Whitmore family found alive after 2 decades. Trapped behind the walls. Who held them? Daughters say they heard voices in the walls. Television crews camped outside the hospital. Old classmates of the girls reappeared online. Former employees gave interviews. But Greta, the housekeeper who called police in 1987, said one thing that stuck. There was something off about that house, even before they disappeared. She remembered locked doors in the basement, rooms that didn't match the blueprints, sounds at night, soft scraping, like furniture moving by itself. She had told Eleanor once. Eleanor dismissed it, said it was probably just the wind. But Greta never forgot the last morning she walked through the mansion. The smell of tea, the untouched eggs, and one chair pulled slightly away from the table, as if someone had gotten up and never sat back down. Investigators began looking into the house's construction history. Blueprints from 1946 showed no secret rooms, no shafts, no hidden wiring. But permits from 1973 showed something strange. A remodel, approved by an architect named Harlan Fitch. He was 26 at the time, worked freelance, no major projects. And then nothing, no record of employment after 1978, no death certificate, no taxes, no trace. The name Harlan Fitch vanished, just like the Whitmores. But in one of the journals Eleanor kept, there was an entry that read, "Mr. Fitch visited again. Said the world was worse. He brought us fresh linen. He said not to trust the new voices." New voices? Plural? Detectives began to wonder, was it just one captor? Or was there a network? And more chilling than that, did the Whitmores agree to be hidden? That possibility rewired everything. Because if the family wasn't forced, what were they hiding from? In an interview, Lacey said something strange. She was holding a photograph of her younger self, taken in 1986. She stared at it and whispered, "I don't remember this girl." Dr. Shaw asked what she meant, and Lacey said, "Because I think we were different before we went in, and someone made us forget." This wasn't just a disappearance. This was erasure, and the person who built the room knew exactly what they were doing. But who builds a prison inside a mansion? And why? That answer wouldn't come from the family. Not yet, because the more they were questioned, the more they withdrew. Eleanor stopped speaking. Robert grew anxious in sunlight. The daughters never left each other's side. But one morning, hospital staff found something taped to Caroline's door. A note. It read, "We weren't the first ones. Check the west wall, under the panel." Detectives rushed to the house. They tore open the wall, and behind it, another room, smaller, dustier, empty, except for a name scratched into the wall. TM 1965. Another secret, another silence, and another buried story, waiting to be found. The writing in the wall was shallow, faint, scratched by a weak hand. Just 3 letters in a year. TM 1965. They didn't belong to the Whitmores. And yet, they were hidden behind the same west wall that held them for 2 decades. Wider investigation of the blueprints revealed something no one had noticed. That part of the house, it wasn't in the original design. It had been added sometime between 1959 and 1964. The official records called it a storage wing, but there were no shelves, no light fixtures, no signs of storage, just a narrow corridor. And at the end, a sealed panel. When the crew pried it open, they found a hidden cavity about the size of a walk-in closet. Inside, a single rusted cot, a crumpled wool blanket, one child's shoe, and a diary locked shut with a rusted clasp. The initials on the front, TM, no last name, no ID, but in the back corner of the closet wall, written in faded charcoal, was this line: "They say the house remembers, but I think it forgets on purpose." Suddenly, the Whitmore case wasn't isolated. It was layered, and someone had been here before them. Back at the hospital, Caroline Whitmore began to speak again, only in the early mornings, only to Dr. Shaw. She described things that weren't in any journal, things no one could have told her. There were knocks sometimes, not from our wall, from the one next to it. Mom said it was the pipes, but I heard words. A boy, or maybe a girl, said their name was Tommy, or maybe Tilly. I don't remember. She remembered hearing someone crying in the middle of the night. For years, the walls weren't soundproof. They were porous, and what echoed inside wasn't just loneliness. It was memory. Dr. Shaw checked the family's therapy logs again. There was no mention of TM, but Eleanor had written in one entry, "The man said this house used to protect people." Then it changed. Who was the man? Mr. Fitch, the alleged architect, or someone else? The investigation circled back to Harlan Fitch. Still no trace of him in any living registry. But a retired clerk in Augusta remembered filing an unapproved permit in the 70s, filed under a different name. H. March. The handwriting matched the 1973 remodeling plans for the Whitmore estate, which meant Fitch had used aliases, and maybe so had his employer. Meanwhile, Lacey Whitmore started sketching. In silence, in therapy, in sleep. Her drawings always showed the same hallway, arched ceilings, no lights, and a door with no handle. In one sketch, a small boy stood beside the door, holding a blanket. On the blanket were stitched letters, M. Her drawings matched the hidden room they had just discovered, even though she had never seen it. Not in photographs, not in descriptions. She had just remembered. Investigators dug deeper. They learned that the Whitmore mansion had been built atop a foundation that predated the house itself. An older estate had burned down in 1922. No one had bothered to demolish the basement. They just built over it. Historical records revealed it had once belonged to a man named Silas March, a reclusive businessman. No wife, no children. But in 1918, a court record showed that Silas had adopted a boy, name redacted, age 5, disposition, behavioral concerns. No other records followed. The theory began to take shape, that this wasn't just about the Whitmores. It was about the house itself, a place that had long been used for something: controlled silence, hidden rooms, erased histories. Some began calling it the Whisper House. Others believed it was part of a government program, untraceable conditioning, memory experiments. But there was no proof, just drawings, voices, and the fact that people kept disappearing inside its walls. Then something strange happened. On November 8th, 2007, 1 month after the family was discovered, Caroline woke up from a nightmare. She told Dr. Shaw the voice had returned. It said, "You were never supposed to come out." The next day, a package arrived at the hospital. No return address. No postage. Just a brown box, delivered by hand, to the nurse's station. Inside, an old key, a cassette tape, and a note. Play this with the walls still remember. Then leave. The police brought the items back to the Whitmore estate. They returned to the west wall, the room where TM had once stayed. The key unlocked a trapdoor in the floorboards they hadn't noticed before. Underneath, a tape recorder. Dusty, corroded, but still functional. They played the tape. White noise at first, then a voice. Male, familiar. If you're hearing this, then you broke the rule. You let the family out. It was supposed to stay closed. They were safe inside, safer than you'll ever be. Do not dig further. The next one won't come out sane. The voice ended, and for exactly 14 seconds, there was silence, followed by a child's laugh. Just once, then static. The tape was bagged as evidence. Forensics couldn't match the voice, but Dr. Shaw recognized something. She said it sounded like Robert Whitmore. But Robert had never recorded that message, at least not in the past 20 years. That night, Caroline had another dream. This time, she walked down the long hallway from her sketches. At the end, the door opened. Inside, she said, was a boy with no face. He held her hand and said, "You're not the first. You're just the first who left." The question grew louder. Had the house done something to them? Or worse, had the family agreed to be part of something bigger? Dr. Shaw asked Lacey what she thought the house wanted, and Lacey whispered, to be forgotten. But the house wasn't letting go, because just 2 days later, construction crews digging into the old foundation hit another wall. Behind it, a third room, and this time there was someone inside. The wall crumbled slowly. Behind it, dust, rot, a smell no one could name. And then a figure, not bones, not a body long gone. A man, alive. He blinked when the flashlight hit his eyes, winced, raised his hand, and whispered something no one expected. "Is it morning yet?" He said his name was Mason Ellis, age 39, except the record said otherwise. Mason Ellis had gone missing in 1989. He was 14 at the time, and now he hadn't aged a day. He was taken straight to the hospital. When asked where he had been, he answered, "Downstairs." She said I was safer there. "Who is she?" He wouldn't say. When asked if he knew the Whitmores, he nodded. "Lacey gave me her last candle. I kept it lit." It didn't make sense. Caroline and Lacey had no memory of a boy named Mason. Eleanor had never written of him, and Robert refused to even look at him. But Mason, he remembered them all. We played 20 questions every night. Eleanor hummed when she made soup. Robert carved chess pieces from pencils. I left when the knocking stopped, when the light went out. That's when she said I could go. Doctors found no physical evidence Mason had been in captivity for decades. He was malnourished, but not starved. His reflexes were sharp. His memory was too sharp. Dates, names, every detail of the mansion, including parts that had been sealed since the 80s. The trapdoor to his room had been hidden under a section of the cellar, now flooded with roots and mold. But the chamber was dry. On the wall, written in a child's handwriting, were dozens of tallies. Thousands. Years' worth. Each group of 5 marked with a candle symbol. And one drawing that stood out. 3 figures. A man, a woman, a girl, and above them, a speaker with sound lines drawn in thick charcoal. A line pointing from it to a note. She says, "I'm almost ready." Theories exploded again. Was Mason another victim? Or was he something else? A test? A piece? Mason asked for one thing before police took his statement. to go back to the room. He stood in the doorframe, didn't enter, said the room felt wrong, that the energy was reversed. Then he turned and said, "They changed it." She went like that. Caroline, hearing this, went pale. She told Dr. Shaw, "That's the voice I heard through the wall. In the years we thought we were alone. So if Mason was real and had been there before, why didn't the Whitmores remember?" The answer came 2 days later. Forensics retrieved more data from the old tape recorder found beneath the floorboards. The audio was badly degraded, but some words were decipherable. If subject resists, initiate Protocol 6. No sunlight for 1 week. Begin memory cycling. Repeat core family phrases until stable. It wasn't just captivity. It was programming. Mason Ellis wasn't just hidden. He had been used. And the Whitmores, they had been rewritten. When confronted with this theory, Mason grew quiet. Then he said, "She told me to forget everything, but I remembered her voice. It wasn't a woman. Not really." Dr. Shaw asked what he meant, and Mason simply said, "The house spoke with her voice, but it was something else." She called it the echo. The echo. Caroline began drawing again. This time, different from before. She drew blueprints, circular halls, mirrored rooms, doors that led nowhere, stairs that ended in walls. And in the center of every drawing, a circle, surrounded by speakers. She didn't remember learning architecture, but the drawings were correct, measured, geometric, almost ritualistic. Then something even stranger happened. Lacey, who had remained quiet since Mason's discovery, spoke 3 words in her sleep. Ellis, March, subject. The same names found in the permit records. Ellis, her friend Mason. March, the alias of the missing architect, Harlan Fitch. Subject, the term used in the tape logs. Was Lacey being triggered, or was a conditioning never truly broken? Dr. Shaw requested permission to hypnotize her, to regress her memory. At first, the family declined, but Lacey agreed, and what she said under hypnosis changed everything. There were 3 doors. Only one opened. Behind the others was screaming. She said the screaming wasn't pain. It was data. I didn't know what that meant. I still don't. Data. This wasn't just a family held hostage. It was an experiment. Conducted for what purpose? Memory? Control? Endurance? In the newly discovered chamber where Mason had been found, police unearthed more evidence. A cracked mirror, a projector lens, and a single 16mm reel labeled. Subject B. Phase 2 reset attempt 4. It was sent to the FBI for analysis. Contents unreleased to the public, but whispers leaked that the footage showed people walking through the mansion, on repeat, performing the same actions. Eating, sitting, reading, no sound, just repetition. And in one frame, a man adjusting a speaker. The man? Robert Whitmore. Not in 1987. In 1999. 12 years after he was believed to be locked away. How? Was he allowed to leave? Did he help build the rooms? Was he part of the design? Or worse, was he one of the designers? Dr. Shaw confronted Robert. He said nothing. But when she mentioned the name Fitch, he stood up and walked to the window. He looked out for a long time, and finally said, "You don't understand. We weren't victims. We were chosen. We weren't victims. We were chosen." That's what Robert Whitmore said as he stared out the hospital window, not in anger, not in fear, with a quiet certainty, as if the truth had always been there, just waiting for someone to ask. The world had spent 2 decades searching for answers. Now, it seemed the Whitmores may have never wanted to be found. Investigators combed through Robert's business records. In 1985, 2 years before the family vanished, he made a series of donations to obscure academic institutions. Think tanks with no campuses, no professors, no students. Just names. One of them, the March Institute. Sound familiar? March, the alias used by Harlan Fitch. The same alias tied to the hidden permits in the mansion. The same name whispered by Lacey in her sleep. Tax records showed the Institute received over $200,000 in anonymous gifts from Whitmore-linked trusts. Then nothing. The March Institute disappeared from federal filings in 1987, the same year the Whitmores vanished. Back at the house, another room was uncovered beneath the west wing, sealed behind concrete, covered by soil and vines. Inside, a bank of equipment, long dead, screens cracked, cables rotted. But one monitor had a post-it note still stuck to the frame. Faded ink read, reset failed, subjects looping. What did that mean? Were the Whitmores being watched? Was their life underground some kind of experiment? Was Mason part of it? Was Tim? How long had this been going on? And for whom? Dr. Shaw confronted Robert with the discovery. He didn't deny it. He didn't confirm it. He said only this. She said the house would protect us, that the outside was dying, that we had to stay clean. Who is she? Dr. Shaw asked. The one in the wires. She speaks through static, through dreams, through the floor. It sounded like madness, but the data kept proving him right. The FBI began looking deeper. They uncovered a Cold War-era file marked Project Hollow Hearth, declassified in fragments, black lines over everything important. But one section was clear. Objective. Construct controlled domestic environments capable of housing live subjects under long-term psychological observation. Subjects must be unaware of observation. Control achieved via auditory programming and light-based conditioning. There it was. The house was the experiment. And the Whitmores? Volunteers? Participants? Or prisoners? An audio technician enhanced the original tape pulled from under Mason's chamber. At 2:37 in the recording, a second voice appeared. Faint, distorted, female. She says, Ellis subject achieves stability. Loop interrupted. Recommend rollback. Loop, that word again. It showed up in the March Institute files. In Eleanor's journal. In Caroline's drawings, circles, over and over. Repetitions. Routines. Lacey was still quiet. But Dr. Shaw noticed something. She was drawing again. Only now, her drawings weren't hallways. They were people. People with faces blurred into spirals. Eyes scratched out. Smiles too wide. And every page, in the lower corner, one phrase. Do not open the clock. But someone had opened the clock. And whatever was behind that wall had started leaking out. Construction crews reported strange sounds in the mansion again. Not rats. Not pipes. Clicking. Electrical. Like the sound of a switch turning on, without anyone nearby. One worker said he saw a light flicker in the sealed room. Another swore he heard a recording playing faintly in the air ducts. A female voice. Begin sequence. Protocol 1987. That's when investigators noticed the calendar. A wall calendar in one of the forgotten rooms. Still hanging. The date? October 3rd. The same day the Whitmores vanished. The page was yellowed, but someone had circled the date in red ink. And beneath it, one handwritten word. Return. Had this all been designed? Was the family meant to resurface now? After 20 years? After the systems were reactivated? Caroline began speaking in patterns again, repeating lines from her childhood. Mom made oatmeal on Thursdays. The books go in alphabetical order. Chester barks when it rains. At first, it seemed like nostalgia. But Dr. Shaw realized something chilling. She was reciting entries, not memories. Entries like a script, like someone had written these routines and played them back. Meanwhile, Mason Ellis began drawing maps, not of the house, but of something beneath it. He called it the core, a circular chamber. No doors, just walls lined with mirrors and speakers. He said, that's where the dreaming started. Dreaming or programming? One day, Mason stood up mid-interview, said, it's awake again, collapsed, seizure, eyes rolled back. And when he woke up, he whispered, subject reset, ready for intake. Then he screamed, and didn't stop for 7 minutes. He's been unresponsive ever since. Caroline visited him once, sat beside him, held his hand, said, I think we were friends. Or, maybe I just watched you sleep. The FBI sealed the mansion again, but not before one final sweep of the basement. There, they found a room with no number, a door with no knob, just a black pad with a wire hanging loose. It pulsed, faintly like a heartbeat. Inside was a chair, a speaker, and a photograph of Robert Whitmore at a desk, smiling. Behind him, a wall full of screens, and in the reflection of one monitor, a girl in a white dress, smiling back. It was Lacey, but younger, much younger than she should have been when the photo was taken. And she wasn't alone. Standing behind her, half-cropped, barely visible, was the man investigators thought had vanished in 1978. Harlan Fitch, still alive, still watching. The photo was old, warped at the edges, faded where it shouldn't have been. But there was no doubt it was him. Harlan Fitch, the architect who vanished, the man with no obituary, the name wrapped in permits, permits wrapped in secrets. There he stood, behind young Lacey Whitmore, watching her watch a screen. The photo was estimated to have been taken around 1991, for years after the Whitmores allegedly disappeared, which raised a new question. They hadn't been alone. Not just Mason, not just TM, not just the voices and the vents. Someone had been with them. Someone had been guiding them. And in the corner of the photo, scribbled almost like a watermark, Subject D, cognitive drift, 6%. Observation, stable. It was a log. The family hadn't just been locked away. They were being studied. The FBI searched for Harlan Fitch again. No records, no fingerprints. But a lead surfaced from an unexpected place. A nursing home in Vermont. An orderly named Alice recognized the name. Said an old man with notebooks had stayed there under the name Henry Farrow. He'd had no visitors, paid in cash, and wrote every morning from 5 to 7 without fail. When she was asked why she remembered him so clearly, she said, he looked like he was waiting for someone to find him, or for someone to come out. She gave them one of the notebooks he left behind. Most of it was unreadable. Numbers, symbols, phrases in Latin, references to echo drift, loop recursion, perception folds, and one chilling line repeated 7 times. Control is consent plus silence. That became the unofficial motto for the case. Control is consent plus silence. But what did that mean? Had the Whitmores agreed to what was done to them? Had they signed something? Had they been told the truth, or only a version of it? Robert still refused to talk. Eleanor remained silent. Mason slipped deeper into catatonia. Only Caroline spoke, but less and less each day. And Lacey, she began to dream again. One night, she whispered, she wants to finish it. Dr. Shaw asked, who? The voice in the wires. In a last-ditch effort to piece the mystery together, Dr. Shaw requested permission to bring Lacey back to the house. Not to stay, just to walk the halls. Sometimes the mind remembers through movement, not questions. The family refused at first. Then Caroline agreed on one condition, that she could walk the house alone first. She arrived with a recorder, walked each corridor, stopped at the west wing, paused in front of the fireplace, then whispered, "It's still here." On the recorder, her words were faint, but they weren't alone. At minute 12:47, a new voice layered under hers. Digital, female, soft, subject returned to origin. Loop incomplete. Resuming program. The power in the house flickered. One camera died. The rest recorded a humming sound. Low, mechanical, rhythmic, then silence. Caroline walked out calmly. When asked what happened, she said, "She gave me a choice." Dr. Shaw leaned in. "What kind of choice?" Caroline paused. "To forget or to finish?" "Finish what? The program? The experiment? Or something older?" That night, she wrote 3 words in her journal. "Let me remember." Then she slept, and for the first time in weeks, she dreamed. The dream was a room, not the chamber. Something bigger, with walls of glass, and people watching. Men in suits, women in lab coats, a child behind glass. Her. She said they watched her read, watched her cry, watched her eat, alone in silence. And every time she cried, the lights dimmed, and a woman's voice said, "Good, keep going." In the morning, she told Dr. Shaw, "I think I was raised by a voice." The implications were staggering. What if the Whitmores had never really lived in the real world? What if their life before 1987 had already been curated, their memories implanted, their routines designed, their house just another chamber? Project Hollow Hearth, the March Institute, subject loops, cognitive drift, consent through silence. Robert was asked again if they volunteered. His eyes met the agent's, and he said, "We were promised peace, a place where time wouldn't hurt us, where grief couldn't reach us. We didn't disappear. We paused." And what about TM? Mason? The faceless boy in Lacey's drawings? Were they all participants? Or were they tests? Was the Whitmore family the final loop? Or just another one? In the basement of the house, one final panel was found, buried behind a false wall in the utility room. Inside, a server rack. Dead now, but dated. 2023. Someone had been here recently, and someone was still updating the system. The last log file was chilling. A single line. Next subject intake scheduled. October 3rd, 2027. 40 years to the day since the Whitmores vanished. 4 names. Redacted. And under it, ready the house. It wasn't over. It never was. Because this house was built to remember. The final server log didn't lie. It was time-stamped, secure, and updated just weeks before the house was reopened. 4 names, redacted, and a line. Next subject intake scheduled, October 3rd, 2027. October 3rd. Exactly 40 years to the day that the Whitmores disappeared. The implication was terrifying. This wasn't an accident. This was an experiment gone rogue. It was a program, still alive, still operating, and the house was still listening. The FBI resecured the estate. Every entrance welded, every hidden room documented. But the feeling that something was still watching, it never left. Caroline requested to see the photo again, the one with young Lacey. The monitor reflection, the man behind her, Harlan Fitch. She stared at it for a long time. then whispered, "I remember him." She closed her eyes. He smelled like bleach and smoke. He called us the clean ones. Dr. Shaw pushed further. "Why that name?" "Because the others were broken," Caroline said. "We were the fresh cycle, the loop that would last." She paused, then added something colder. "The ones before a scream too much." Project Hollow Hearth, loop cycles, memory conditioning, environmental controls, cognitive reprogramming, and now subject intake schedule for 2027. Who was running it? Who approved it? And what would it take to stop it? Caroline began drawing again. Not people, not halls, schematics, complex, layered, the architecture of a machine, not just the house. Something beneath it, a circular mechanism, she said, buried below the old root cellar. That's where they heard the signal. That's where she waited. A team was sent with ground-penetrating radar, and deep beneath the earth, they found it, a chamber, 14 feet wide, 12 feet down, buried, reinforced, sealed in concrete. They drilled, carefully, slowly. Inside, cables, more speakers, a single steel chair, and above it, bolted into the wall, a device shaped like a flower, petals closed, smooth, matte black, no wires in or out, no interface. But when they entered the chamber, it pulsed. Caroline was brought to view it through a monitor. She gasped, "That's her. That's the echo." All this time, the term had sounded symbolic, mythical, but it wasn't. It was hardware, an object. The echo wasn't just a name. It was a system. And then the power in the mansion failed, just for 10 seconds. But in that time, every speaker across the property came alive. One sentence, female voice, soft, mechanical, loop incomplete. Resuming last safe state. Lacey collapsed. Her pulse flatlined for 7 seconds before she gasped awake. Eyes wide, voice unfamiliar. Protocol accepted. Rebuild initiated. The hospital went into lockdown. The Whitmore family was separated. And that's when the truth began to bleed out. Caroline's blood work came back strange. Elevated dopamine. Suppressed cortisol. Unnatural neurochemistry. But more than that, synthetic enzymes in her spinal fluid, unidentifiable, engineered, placed inside her. A scan revealed a microscopic implant in the base of her neck, inactive now, but wired to receive radio signal. Robert had one too. So did Lacey. Even Eleanor, though it was dormant. Mason, when tested, had two, and in both cases, their implants pulsed when they neared the mansion. The conclusion was clear. The Whitmores weren't just monitored, they were programmed. But why? To test memory limits, behavioral adaptation, environmental stress, or something deeper? Then came the final piece. The box recovered from the hidden lower chamber, next to the echo device. Inside, a series of reel-to-reel tapes, each labeled with a number, not a name, and one envelope. Inside, a single photograph of a family, father, mother, 2 children, taken in 1965, smiling, happy, in front of a house, the same house. On the back, written in pencil, Loop 1, Family 0, March Protocol. Failed after 214 days. One survivor extracted. The boy in the photo? TM. The initials found in the wall. The child who scratched warnings into the plaster. The one no one could find. He was Loop 1, the first test. And the Whitmores? Loop 4. The tapes were degraded, but the last one played. A man's voice. Tired. Measured. Sounding like Robert, but younger. They say forgetting is kindness, but forgetting is silence, and silence is control. We entered the chamber by choice, but not all of us left the same. If you're hearing this, you're in the loop now. Lacey began to cry that night, for the first time since being found. Not silently, not softly, but like a child. A long, sharp sound of something cracking open inside her. Dr. Shaw sat beside her and asked, "What do you remember?" Lacey answered, "Everything." The Whitmores were no longer victims. They were witnesses, carriers of secret buried in walls, in blood, in systems older than they knew. And whether they wanted to or not, they were about to decide what happened next. The silence after Lacey's words was unlike the rest. Not the silence of trauma, or sedation, or programming. It was a silence of someone who had remembered everything, and knew there was no way to forget it again. Dr. Shaw sat with her for nearly an hour. No questions, no clipboard, no tape recorder, just 2 chairs, and the weight of a secret share between them. When she finally spoke, Lacey whispered, "It started before us, before the house, before even Fitch. It started with the idea that memory could be controlled, not just erased, but shaped. The echo wasn't just an experiment in containment. It was an experiment in creation, a machine that could build reality inside the mind, then let the subject believe they had built it themselves. The house was the container. The echo was the architect. And the Whitmores? They were the blueprint. Loop 4, the most successful run. 4 subjects, 20 years, minimal deviation, until the knocking started, until the speaker failed, until the outside world found them too soon. Lacey's memory spilled out slowly, not all in words, sometimes in pictures, sometimes in posture, sometimes in phrases that didn't make sense until hours later. She described the core room, the sealed mechanism below the foundation. It wasn't just hardware, it was ritual. Every 88 hours, they were woken by the same sound, a low pulse, a flicker of light behind the walls, and a phrase always the same: begin restoration, memory anchor engaged. Robert called it the music. He said it helped him sleep. Eleanor said it gave her headaches. But the girls, they thought it was normal, part of life. Lacey said she once tried to hum the melody out loud. She couldn't. Her throat would seize. Her hands would shake. And she would forget why she started in the first place. Conditioned silence. Dr. Shaw requested a meeting with the Department of Justice. She brought all the evidence, the tapes, the photographs, the schematics, the recovered implant data. She made the case that Project Hollow Hearth was still active, maybe not officially, but somewhere in some dark archive. Someone was still pulling the strings. The response was chilling. The DOJ declined to comment. And the next day, Dr. Shaw was removed from the case. Official reason? Emotional entanglement. Unofficial? She got too close. The Whitmores were transferred to a private medical facility. Caroline tried to resist. Lacey wept silently. Robert said nothing. Eleanor looked relieved, as if something had finally come full circle. But before they left, Dr. Shaw received a package. No return address. No label. Inside, a single key and a note. One room remains. She returned to the mansion one last time. Alone, found the old cellar staircase. It creaked under her weight. She counted the steps. 17. But that day there were 18. The last one opened like a hatch. Underneath, a narrow corridor, lit only by the glow of an old emergency lamp. At the end, a door, steel, cold, with a lock that matched the key in her hand. She turned it. The door groaned open. Inside, a chair, facing a mirror, and nothing else. She sat, waited, watched herself, and then the mirror lit up. Not a mirror, a screen. And there, standing on the other side, was Harlan Fitch. Older, barely breathing, eyes like frost. He stared at her and said, "If you found this, you're part of the loop now. Don't try to understand it. Just listen." He spoke for 17 minutes. What he said would never be made public, but Dr. Shaw took notes, pages and pages, and the final line burned itself into her memory. The mind will forget anything if you teach it how. She never returned to the facility. She never saw the Whitmores again. But sometimes at night, she dreams of the house. And in those dreams, she hears a voice. Loop incomplete. Awaiting subject. A year passed. Then 2. Then 5. The public forgot. The media moved on. The house was sold to a holding company. Surveillance was removed. The cameras blinked out. The basement was sealed. And everything went quiet until a letter arrived to Dr. Shaw's old office. No envelope, just a folded page. One sentence. The house is awake. And below it, the date. October 3rd, 2027. That date is still in the system. Still logged. Still ticking toward its destination. And no one has stopped it, because this was never about the family. Not just about the Whitmores. Not just about Mason or TM or the ones who whispered through the walls. This was about the system, the program, the belief that silence is control, that memory is obedience, that the mind can be rewritten if you close enough doors. And when the clock strikes again, another door will open, another voice will whisper, and another family may forget who they were, all in the name of the perfect loop. There's something about memory that makes it dangerous. It pretends to be truth. But truth is heavier. Truth has gravity. And when it falls, it doesn't just land. It buries. The Whitmore family was never declared legally dead, but they were never fully alive again either. After their disappearance, after the rediscovery, after the echo, after the silence broke, they were moved to an undisclosed location, not for safety, but for study, publicly. The world believed they had suffered a psychological break, a shared delusion, an episode brought on by prolonged isolation. Privately, the files were marked, observation ongoing, loop status dormant, no more updates, no interviews, just blank space. In 2027, on October 3rd, the mansion burned. No witnesses, no accelerant, no storm, just flame, starting from the west wing, moving like it remembered the blueprint of its own secrets. By the time firefighters arrived, the estate was gone. Ash, embers, silence again. But underneath the ruin, the foundation remained, untouched, uncracked, and the chamber, still sealed, still humming. They tried to excavate it. 3 days into the dig, the machines failed, for workers walked off the job. One simply said, "Something's still breathing down there." They left it buried. Dr. Shaw, no longer practicing, moved to Oregon, changed her name. But once a year on the same day, she receives a postcard. No address, just a picture of a clock. The same antique design that once stood in the Whitmore foyer. And written across the bottom, "Reset successful." She never replies, but she keeps them all in a locked drawer. And every October, she opens it and waits. Mason Ellis was never recovered. He walked out of the hospital 2 months after Lacey remembered everything. Cameras caught him boarding a bus in Maine. Then nothing. No credit cards. No ID. Just vanished. The way the house taught him to. TM's remains were never found. Only his scratchings, his notes in the walls, his initials barely surviving the rot, a name swallowed by a system that never gave names back. Eleanor Whitmore passed quietly in 2028. Heart failure, no visitors, no obituary. Her death certificate listed no occupation, no prior history, just a line. No known next of kin, but she had a family. Didn't she? Or was the family part of the loop? A memory held together by routine and light and a voice in the wall? What makes a person real? Their memories? Their past? Or the people who remember them? And if those people forget, do you disappear? Caroline still lives in the care facility. She doesn't speak anymore, but she paints. Circles, mirrors, rooms with no doors, a girl standing in front of a screen. And once, just once, she painted something else. 4 chairs, a long table, and across from the chairs, a mirror with no reflection, just a dark shape, watching. Lacey lives under a new name. She teaches art at a community college, never gives interviews, never mentions her past. But her students say she sometimes zones out for minutes at a time, like she's listening for something. She keeps one item in her office, an old wind-up clock. It doesn't tick. But once, during a storm, the power went out, and a student swears they heard it chime. 3 slow notes, then silence. No one else heard it, but Lacey smiled and whispered, "She's still here." Not long after, a document leaked online, unofficial, fragmented, titled Hollow Hearth Loop Design Protocols. It listed 9 names, all redacted, all marked, subject stable, memory corrected, observation paused, and one line beneath, Site 7, active, next subject prepared. The forum that posted it was deleted within the hour, but not before someone saved the page and shared it and whispered the same words across dark corners of the internet. It never ended. Maybe it never will. Maybe the point of the echo was never to end, just to reset, to rewrite, to begin again. And maybe, just maybe, you've heard its voice too, late at night, in the wires, behind the walls, in the places you don't look too closely. A hum, a click, a whisper. You're safe here. Don't come out until the clock stops ticking.